You'd think that 3 episodes in we'd have figured out how to do intros by now, but
We're going to have to talk about Anthropic again, aren't we?
I have a bad feeling we do.
You know, like, I swear we're not doing this on purpose. It's just been like a weird 3 weeks where all of the labs have been quietly sitting in the corner watching in horror and maybe enjoyment as Anthropic shoots a 12 gauge into their foot over and over and over again for about 3 weeks straight now. I think we had 4.7 came out, and it is truly a model of all time. Then they screwed up the system prompts. Then we had the desktop app come out, and it wasn't very good. There's some mysterious bannings happening again. Dario is being weird on national television again. I don't know. Where do we
They
start
did
with
briefly lift the shotgun that was pointed at their feet to point it at Figma and fire one last round in their dying corpse. That was fun to see.
this? Yeah.
Yeah, they're down 87%, I think, their stock since IPO. It dropped another 15 points after that announcement. Yeah, I was almost spot on. It's 85% down lifetime.
Wait, oh my God. Is this actually April 17th when it came out?
Yep.
It was a 5% drop. Holy shit.
Anthropic has found this incredible ability to take more value from the world than they give it. It's truly impressive.
It genuinely is.
Claude Design was fun, but yeah, I have a whole video about that coming out already. I don't think that a design product is the best thing to do in a podcast where people are largely listening over audio.
Agreed.
But you know what is really good for people who are listening on audio? Conspiracy theories.
Oh, this will be fun.
I have a long rabbit hole to go down with you that I've been hinting at for a bit now.
You have been.
My conspiracies as for the real reasons why Claude models have been behaving so much worse.
You teased this for me last night, but I'll let you tee this one up how you want to.
Well, first, we have to open with some brand friendliness. I want to show an example of a good chat that somebody had with Opus 4.7. This is a real chat thread that somebody had with Opus 4.7 that has been amusing me all day. They opened it with the pleading face emoji, to which Opus responded in all lowercase, "The pleading emoji is not a master key, Emily. Then why does it work on my boyfriend? Different training data. Is it because I make his dingling go shaboing boing? That would be the reinforcement learning with human feedback. Yeah."
Where are we going with this one?
I don't know. I just had to see this cursed post, and I figured that everybody else should too.
I think my quality of life just went down, but thank you for that.
I still wish we could have named the show Unacquirable.
I really do. Yeah, that would have been so much better.
Yeah, Nerd Snipe's fine though. I mean, we already have the very permanent wall art made, so I think we're stuck
We
with
do.
it.
Yeah, Riot offered, like, if we wanted to, he would like 3D print a nice logo and all that, but I don't think you can get much better than that. I think we're good, to be honest.
I do want to get into my conspiracy theories around why Claude is dumber.
Yes.
But I have one other set of conspiracy theories I want to go over first.
Okay.
The bans.
Oh, yeah. I've vaguely been following this one. We go for it.
Yeah. So if you didn't know, Anthropic has a little bit of psychosis around safety stuff right now. Some of it is justifiable with Mythos. Some of it is much less justifiable. I was at the point where I was just trying out Opus 4.7 in Claude.ai, and it was refusing to let me prompt about like basic cryptography problems. Not even hacking, just like a picture that had bottles with words on them that I had to do a weird cipher on to generate the answer. Writing code for ciphers was enough for it to get flagged and kill the thread unless I was willing to restart it with Sonnet 4. Not Sonnet 4.5 or 4.6, not Opus 4.5 or 4.6. Sonnet 4 was the recommended model to resume a new chat with, which is just in and of itself insane. But yeah, it is very clear that our friends over at Anthropic are so paranoid about safety that they are actively degrading the quality of the product and the reliability of their services because of it.
The weird one that I ran into with this is I watched this happen on a ton of different surfaces, and I went to try Opus 4.7. I really haven't used it a huge amount except for like one run that cost, I think, like $40 of API credit. I did it through Open Code Black, so thanks for that one, Dax. But the actual run I did was using Pi as the harness, and I was having it try and like reverse engineer and figure out what the actual like device inputs were for a USB thing that didn't have firmware for a Mac. It only had software for Windows. So I wanted to hack it to make it work on the Mac. And this thing was going through and doing like Wireshark tracing and a bunch of like at least security adjacent things. but it was doing it through the Pi harness and it never stopped. Like it was on very high reasoning and it ran for many hours and it just kind of did the thing. I really think that this is them just lobotomizing it within first party Claude products. I don't know if this is true, but it seems like over a third party API, it's not nearly as bad.
Hard to know for sure because there's two types of blocking. I guess there's probably more than two, but there's like the two core layers where the blocking occurs right now. There is the blocking via things like the system prompt in the model's training, where the model was trained with less security stuff. Opus 4.7 actually performs worse on a lot of safety and security benches than 4.6 because it was intentionally tried to be gimped in that way. And I think their attempts to gimp the model there have hurt it in plenty of other places, as many people have observed with the model not feeling meaningfully better. The other place in the model side is through the system prompt, which ended up causing really bad user experience across a lot of different Anthropic products over the last few days. Like when I first was trying out the new model in the Claude Code desktop app, it opened and closed every response it had with a note letting me know that it looks like I was being prompt injected because the reminder about malware that they injected in the system prompt was so fucking stupid.
Yep, that one. I forgot about that one. Yeah. The thing is, I think there's actually a third one happening here where they're definitely doing something in the system prompt. Obviously, it's telling us it is. But I think like on the Claude.ai website, there's probably a second model that is like babysitting the chat to fire off that tool of like, nope, you're not allowed to do this. Stop it. Go and use this dumber model or whatever. So I think that babysitter is not in place for other third-party stuff, which makes it a little bit more usable. So like basically what I'm trying to say here is if you want to use the new Claude model, do not use it through first-party tools and harnesses. OpenCode's great, Pi is great, Cursor's great. Do it elsewhere.
I'm going to do something different that I'm not sure if other podcasts do or not because I don't really listen to them and I don't think they assume as high of intelligence of their audience as I'm about to. We're going to do some foreshadowing.
Okay.
Is it fair to say from the experience that we have had, both you and me, but also like the community as a whole, that there is effectively a 0% chance that the version of things Anthropic employees use internally is the same as what we get to use externally? In particular, the issues I had with the Claude Code desktop app clearly indicates that the version they were running when they tested Opus 4.7, something either with the model, the API, or with the app itself was different in order for that horrible user experience to happen. Like, obviously, right?
Yes, obviously.
So that's not even a conspiracy. It's very clear that Anthropic is using their own different things internally and that their employees are not using the same software that we're using externally.
Almost certainly. You can just tell by using it.
Okay, just remember that for later, okay, guys?
This will be fun, actually. I think I have an idea of where this is going.
You don't. Back to what I was saying with the bans, though, because for the first time, we saw not just one, but two T3 code users getting hit with bans from Anthropic. For those who aren't familiar, T3 code is a thing that I've somehow managed to not bring up until the third episode of the podcast. It is a harness. It is an orchestrator layer that I built because I hate the GUIs that all of the other companies are putting out for actually working with these agents. Cursor's pretty good, but Cursor 3 is laggy and slow and just not as reliable as I'd like it to be. The Claude Code desktop app is an atrocity. And Codex has good moments, but it also constantly regresses on performance and they have to hotfix it regularly. They just put out a patch today to fix the bug I hit yesterday where the Codex app was taking 3 to 15 seconds to actually send the message after I hit enter. It was just loading spinner before the message popped up. The levels of regression I'm seeing in these things are insane. So we built T3 code to be a good, reliable, open source alternative that doesn't make its own harness. It doesn't need API keys. It just uses the CLIs you already have on your machine, whether that is the Claude Code CLI, the Cursor CLI, the Codex CLI, and the Open Code CLI. We now work with all of those, at least on the latest nightly, probably in the main version by the time you guys are seeing this. Again, we just wanted a good, performant, open source alternative GUI that doesn't change anything about how the agents work. I want to be very clear about that. We do not have any way to make money. We don't have any way to change the system prompt. We don't do anything but give you a better interface for using the agents that you're probably already using. Which means that for all intents and purposes, there would be no reason for a user of T3 code to get their Claude Code account banned.
I mean, on paper there would be, but they have to get back to us with an update on the TOS.
Yeah, and this is also a company that has went as far as changing how your API requests are billed based on whether or not the word OpenClaw is mentioned in your system prompt.
Yep.
Like, it is actually crazy the level these guys go to the point where it almost feels petty.
Yeah, and they've done this multiple times. Like the first one was OpenCode. If you literally had OpenCode anywhere in there, it would just hard kill the request. I think they just had a regex on there or something stupid. Like they've done this multiple times.
Yep. And to steelman them a tiny bit, because I want to put I don't even know. I just want to build some good faith so you guys don't think I'm just blindly shitting on Anthropic. Let me think of something else nice to say first. Claude Design was almost good. Yeah, that's a nice thing.
I still like how Anthropic models feel to talk to. They're still genuinely nice models, just everything around them kind of sucks. And to Steelman, the thing that we were talking about earlier with like the banning and not wanting third-party harnesses, the problem I personally have with it is not the fact that they are banning it and not allowing it. That's one thing. Like, if that is just the precedent they set and that is how they wanted things to work, that is totally fine. The problem here is it is a weird moving target that they are incredibly unclear about. When it launched, like, I think sometime last summer, I don't remember exactly when, it was totally fine to use your Claude Max sub within OpenCode or any other coding agent harness. And a lot of people did that for many, many months. And then like 6 months in, they were like, no, okay, we're done with this. And then they hard banned OpenCode plus a bunch of others. Then they just kept banning more and more things. At the time, everyone was like, okay, this sucks, but now we can build new stuff around the thing that I assume you're about to go into, which is the Claude Agents SDK, which is a TypeScript library which they created that allows you to basically hook into Claude code, use their stuff under the hood to build a custom harness on top of it. And that is what T3 code uses and a bunch of other things use. And supposedly, based on what we know generally, that should be fine. It is allowed to use You are allowed to use the Agents SDK for your own personal use, but there's a lot of blurry, weird lines here, and we don't know where those lines are. And many, many people have been asking for clarification on this for many weeks now, and we've gotten nothing.
You are not necessarily correct where I'm going here. So, the steel manning I was going to do is say I can somewhat understand why Anthropic is doing this somewhat targeted bans that they are, with or without the Agent SDK or the CLI or any of these other things. I just added a screenshot to the notes so FaZe can add that in too. I was using my Claude Code sub with OpenClaw for a while. When the Claude Code ban happened, I moved my OpenClaw over to using my OpenCode Zen subscription. I'm still using Opus 4.6 on it. What surprised me is that my average spend per day is about $4.31. And I don't actually use my OpenClaw. This is just the heartbeats that OpenClaw does. Since OpenClaw is an agent that you can text and put on like crons or whatever, one of the things it has is a heartbeat where it will run quick and check if any of the things it's supposed to be monitoring have changed. Like if there's emails in your inbox, it should check and stuff like that. And then decide if it should spin up more subtasks to go after those things. Just those heartbeats alone is enough for me to do over $4 a day of spend without actually using this for anything. Sorry, I had to do a little bit of math because I'm not very smart. That's $120 a month of just useless spend if you happen to set this up with OpenClaw.
Yeah.
And there's people who were using the $20 or $100 a month tiers that had this set up. And even if they didn't use their OpenClaw, they were now maxing out the compute, so to speak, there. Part of why this is so expensive is the act of just constantly pinging like that with a lot of context is not a cheap thing. But the other reason this is expensive is harnesses like OpenClaw didn't have great caching set up. If you're not familiar with how caching works with LLMs, every time data goes into the LLM, like your chat history, each token, which is effectively like a word or a group of characters, is used to compute the state of the model and what everything should be pointing to. Because if I have a chat history that's in English and I say the capital of the United States is, my expectation is it will respond with Washington, D.C. and maybe give some context in English. But if I am using Spanish ahead of this, then the model should be steered in that direction. And the way that works is the parameters, which are again those characters inside of the model, the way they point to each other changes based on the history of the chat so far. That is a thing that costs money to compute. And that compute is something that doesn't need to be done every time. If I have the same 5 messages at the top of my history, I shouldn't have to recompute the result of all of those every time. And what the caching does is it kind of snapshots the state of the model and the parameters after that compute is done, so that it doesn't have to do all of the work again in order to get the model in the right state in order to generate the next tokens. OpenClaw did not do caching right, and Anthropic is in a compute crisis right now. As such, they blocked OpenClaw because it is very noisy. It is doing a lot of stuff that they probably don't want it to be doing. And most importantly, it isn't caching well. So each one of those requests is expensive because it isn't cached properly. And also, they happen far enough away from each other that the awful TTLs that they have on the cache makes that non-viable anyways.
As you were saying that, I want to test my theory here to see if I'm correct about where you're going with your conspiracy theory. I could be wrong about this. But for those of you who don't know, Anthropic models can be hosted in multiple places. They can be hosted by Anthropic themselves or on AWS Bedrock, I believe it's called, and on AI, what do they call it in GCP? It's GCP, Google's.
Yeah, the Vertex.
Vertex, yeah, and on Vertex. So there's 3 different places where you can serve Claude models. And what Theo just went through there is the fact that the caching is not great in these third-party tools. But what I think you're talking about here with the compute stuff is that all of these different places have slightly different chips, and Anthropic has a very wide variety of different architectures that they are currently working with. They have the new TPUs that they are buying from Google, and then they have a bunch of like NVIDIA GPUs that they've been using for a while. And there's a lot of diversity in the chipset that is actually running this model, not only in Anthropic, but across these providers. And as a result, since they are load balancing so much traffic, like if I just go into my OpenRouter usage, which does automatic routing for me, you can just look through the list and see that it is constantly switching between all 3 different hosting providers. So something like OpenCode, when it's hitting them through OpenCode Zen, I don't know if they're fixed to one provider or if they're hitting it on a bunch of different ones or how that's working. But if you are switching between these different places, like these different providers per turn, isn't there a chance that that is just fucking the cache pretty damn hard, especially going between different architectures? Am I kind of onto it?
Yes, but this has nothing to do with my conspiracy at all.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we have a ways to go. So back to the banning. Sorry for the sidetracking. I could empathize with Anthropic's desire to ban things like OpenCode or OpenClaw if they're not implementing caching well enough, because all of these things are going through the Anthropic API. So to address your concern here, the Anthropic API should be, and if they had anything resembling competent engineering, will be routing places where your existing cache exists. So if you are in a thread in Claude Code, and I should probably give some context on how this works for people who don't know, when you make a prompt to a tool like Claude Code, it doesn't do one API call. It starts with one API call, but the moment a tool call occurs, like a read or an edit or a bash call or a curl or something like that, the API request is done. It finishes at that point. The tool runs on your machine or the cloud machine that you're running the agent in, and then once the result has been populated, once you run the read or write or whatever, it adds the result to your history and then resubmits as a new API call, and that new API call has to be processed, run somewhere. And in the case of something like the new Opus model with thinking enabled, it also has to pull from database the history of the thinking because we are no longer sent that on the clients. Since the model needs the whole history in order to generate the next thing, it needs the whole history plus your new message. So it has to pull that from database and hopefully identify any relevant caching when it does that, and then send it to a GPU pre-computed with the cache. It does a little more computation to get the model in the right state with the appended data, and then it starts generating additional things. All make sense so far?
Yep.
Cool. As such, that whole flow being kind of broken with tools like OpenClaw or OpenCode, if they're not honoring the way the threads are supposed to work, the caching's supposed to work, the weird quirks that Anthropic is building in everywhere, because why would they follow standards when they could just make vibey bullshit that doesn't actually function the Anthropic way? As such, they are actually, without question, spending more money when users that use things like OpenClaw or OpenCode are using their subs than if you're using it through Claude Code directly. If you ignore all of the weird bugs and other bullshit that they have shipped in Claude Code that cause usage rates to go up significantly. The core point I'm trying to make here is that the weird shit we've been experiencing with this stuff and the blocking that has been occurring with those tools is because it does actually hypothetically cost them more money and more compute for a user to use OpenCode than it does for them to use Claude Code. Boris has went as far as contributing real fixes to OpenClaw in order to try and get OpenClaw to have better caching characteristics, because some people are going to have to move off of using OpenClaw through Claude Code and onto the API instead, and they would be horrified if they saw the costs. So we filed 4 PRs, 3 of which merged in order to try and reduce the cache thrashing, and it seems like those worked. It helped some amount. I haven't merged it, which might be why I'm spending so much money on my heartbeats, but hard to know for sure. All of this said, you would imagine that a tool that is just using Claude Code directly would and should have none of these problems, like T3 Code, which is literally just a GUI wrapper for Claude Code. So people getting banned for that makes approximately negative sense. And thankfully, of the 2 users who were banned, one of them appears to have been banned for heavy use, like pushing past rate limits constantly. And the other was erroneously banned and just got unbanned on a Saturday after I texted 5 friends who work at Anthropic desperate to try and get an answer. I didn't get an answer. All I got's an unban, which is the nature of the black box at Anthropic.
Huh.
So if you were concerned that you might get banned from Claude Code by using T3 code, valid concern. And I hate that it's valid because it shouldn't be, because every interpretation of the existing terms of service that we have would suggest that the way that we are using Claude Code via an open source GUI on your machine would be entirely within the terms of service as they are written. But we don't know for sure because they have continued to push the promise that they will clarify these terms for over like 3 months now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by my interpretation, by all of my friends' interpretations at Anthropic, and by basic readings of their terms of service, we should be good. But people still get banned. So my honest recommendation is to not use Claude Code in anything other than their CLI, or honestly not at all, unless you have the ability to get their attention, which means you have a Twitter account. But if you do end up getting banned and you tweet about it and you tag Boris, Anthoric, and me, you will probably get unbanned, much like the other user who was banned was. You'll never get an answer as to why this all happened, but at the very least, your account should probably be fine. So once again, to be clear, you should be safe. Everything says you will be safe. And thus far, all of the bans that we have seen have been reversed. But in the classic Anthropic way, they have vaguely told us that there is an issue with their flagging of safety things, given us no additional context, and they just quietly unban people sometimes when you make enough noise. Insanity.
I'm going to take a slightly different read on this, that I agree that on paper you should be good, that even like it shouldn't be hitting their compute any harder if you are using the Agents SDK, because under the, or not Agents SDK, the Claude Agent SDK, that SDK should properly be implementing the threading and the caching and the IDs and everything to make sure that a T3 code instance is not hitting their APIs nearly as hard or any harder than a normal Claude code instance would be. The problem is, I honestly think they just don't even want to support it, period. Like, I think that we are just at the point where they fucked up by putting this out, because it kind of opened up Pandora's box where people can now just use their $200 sub, which gets them insane amounts of inference to do tons of crazy stuff. And even like, because OpenClaw implemented a patch that would, instead of using Pi under the hood, or I forget exactly where they implemented it, but at some layer, it was using the Claude Agent SDK for the inference.
Not the Agent SDK. It was literally calling in bash Claude-P the prompt.
Oh yeah, no, you're right.
And then getting a response asynchronously. It wouldn't even stream in the response. It would just give the result when it's done. If you're not familiar with tools like Claude, you can do Claude-P in your terminal, paste a string that is your prompt, and then it will eventually respond with the result when it's done. But that's like running in the background via bash, just like a normal bash command, not using the like pseudo TUI thing that they build in order to like take over your terminal. It's just a traditional bash command you run and get a result like a cat or a curl.
Yep. And I remember that one, and I could be wrong on this, so I'll double check it, but like I am 99% sure that they also did the Agents SDK. Like I remember looking at a couple patches where like my point is just that they tried many different ways to get around this and to be as compliant as possible, and they still got banned. And you will still get banned if you use an Agents SDK patch or the TUI running or the CLI running stuff. You'll still get banned, even though technically it is an open source project that is a personal thing running on your machine. They don't care. They just don't want to take the hit.
There are ways where I can understand this. Things that automate overuse being more sensitive and banned, like OpenClaw, the fact that I'm not even running it or using it and it's still doing $4+ a day of inference, that is a thing where I can at least somewhat empathize with the desire to ban when you're in a compute crisis that is their fault.
And I wholeheartedly agree. I think it is totally fine for them to not be okay with this. What I am not okay with is the black box opaque nature of it. Just be super clear on what is and isn't allowed. That is the problem here. Like, if we are not okay, if OpenClaw is not okay, but a Claude code wrapper is okay, or maybe like a little internal review thing is okay, but then an automated big long running thing isn't okay. Like whatever it is, if it's a number of how much you're allowed to use, or if it is a specific blessed products list, whatever it is, just tell us. That's what I want.
But since they won't tell us things, we have to do the next best thing, which is conspiracies. And I think it is time to get into the conspiratorial section, which is why I brought beer.
Yeah, that's a worthy beer time.
And what better way to start off a conspiracy section than cheers and another quick sponsor break?
Today's sponsor is Clerk, the auth platform that not only makes it super easy to put a sign-in button on your site, but makes it incredibly easy to do literally everything else you would need to do with auth. You need to add payments? Clerk's got it. You need to add API keys? Clerk's got it. You want to set up organizations? Clerk can also do that. It is incredibly easy to work with. They have some of the best documentation I've ever used, one of the best SDKs I've ever worked with. If you're listening on audio, you're just gonna have to take my word for this one. I'm gonna do a quick side-by-side of the organization profile on their homepage and then the organization profile on my site. These look completely different. It is the same general layout, but the fonts, the colors, the corner rounding, the entire feel of it is different. And the syntax for doing all of this is insanely well documented. I didn't have to write any of this. I just took my site and my own custom styles. I told the agent, look into how Clerk component customization actually works and customize the theming on my site to match it accordingly. And the end result was this. And honestly, every time I'm working in a project that doesn't have Clerk, I really wish it was using Clerk. So you should go find out why at nerdsnipe.link/Clerk. Man, I love Clerk. Anyways, so let's get into this. Let's get into it.
How do we start with this one? So the core thing we want to get to the root of isn't why am I getting banned from Claude Code? The answer is incompetence. I want to get into why is Claude dumber than it was just a few months ago? And I'm not the only one who thinks this. Many people do. Historically, I've actually pushed back on these types of conspiracies, saying that like there's no way it's just getting dumber. Maybe they made a mistake in the harness. Maybe they fucked up the system prompt. Maybe they did something stupid that is making it seem dumber or behave dumber. But there's no way that the actual model itself, the inference that exists on the API that you can request from, there's no way that got dumber. Perhaps. But I have done way too much research on this because I have been burned so hard so many times with what I used to love. Like, go back to my old content in December and January where I got Opus pilled when I had my pseudo-psychosis moment with Claude Code and Opus 4.5 during the like Christmas break window. That was the most fun I've had coding in many, many years.
Yeah.
It was magical.
I remember vividly, like I was the open code guy back then and you were all on Claude Code. And I was trying to get you off of Claude Code, but you were very, very happy with it. And if you go back and even look at my videos too, I fucking loved Opus 4.5. That was an incredible model at the time. Still a good model. We just have better things now.
Yeah. The better things are not from Anthropic, though.
No, they are not.
And this is the problem. So the first source that I have here is one from an account on GitHub called Stellar Accident. It is an issue that they opened on the Claude Code repo. Do you know who this person is?
Is this the AMD researcher?
Yes. They are the head of AI at AMD.
Oh, okay.
AMD works on a lot of complex engineering tasks because they have to build everything from drivers to firmware to systems for pressing chips and so much other shit. Like the tasks that they have to complete with code at AMD are things that I am far from qualified to even discuss lightly. So when they say boldly in a issue that they cut from an exec at AMD, Claude Code is unusable for complex engineering tasks with the February updates. There's a lot of red flags here that we need to dig into a bit. This individual audited all of the Claude sessions across the whole company by using the JSON files that are saved for the threads on the machines of their engineers, and then used Claude to automate the process of going through all of this and tracking all of the different changes that have happened over time, including the change in how thinking is presented, or more importantly, redacted, where from January 30th to March 4th, thinking was visible 100% of the time. March 5th, it was down to 1.5%. By March 10th, over 99% of thinking was redacted. And by March 12th, you no longer get any thinking back over the API response. Remember this detail for later. We got a couple things floating in our heads as we get into the conspiracies. The thinking depth has declined before the redaction. The behavioral impact is notable. They measured everything from how often is the stop hook that they wrote being violated. The stop hook's a script that they wrote that looks for when the model tries to dodge ownership, stop prematurely, or ask for permission to do the thing it was already doing, because that just is dumber. How many times did you have to, in the Opus 4.5 era, tell the model, yes, you can actually do the thing I already told you to do?
No, never. It was insanely proactive.
How often do you have to do this now?
A lot.
Yeah.
Opus 4.7 is a lot less proactive.
You can measure it. She measured it as before March 8th, this hook never being hit once, 0 times. After March 8th, 173 times.
Yep.
She also tracked the frustration in user prompts. How often does the user say swears and say fix it or run it or do it, those types of things that indicate frustration, it went from about 5% of prompts to about 10%. So it doubled. The quality of stuff has clearly gone down in measurable ways, including the craziest number, which is near the bottom here. Let me find it. The token usage chunk here. In January, AMD engineers submitted 7,300 prompts. The total input tokens was about 4.6 million, and the total output tokens was about 0.08 million. In March, they did 5,700 prompts, so a meaningful dip down. Instead of the 100 API requests it made before, it was 120,000, 80 times higher. Instead of 4.6 million input tokens, it was 20,508 million, so 20 billion tokens, which is a 170x increase. The output tokens went from 0.08 million to 62.6 million, which is a 64x increase. And the estimated cost on Bedrock went from $26 to 42 grand.
Holy shit. What are these numbers? What? Continue.
We're just getting started. You have no idea how deep this one goes.
Okay. Holy hell. Like, I
don't have AI psychosis anymore. I have Anthropic psychosis.
Is this just the...
You don't know how bad this gets. Okay. So, one more thing we need to agree on before we can go further. For those who aren't familiar, last year around August and September, people started noticing that Sonnet was performing significantly worse. As usual, Anthropic denied, pushed back, it said there's no way, but they have since confirmed that around 0.8% of Sonnet 4 requests were being routed incorrectly between August 5th and August 29th, where they accidentally fucked it up, and it went from 0.8% to 16% of requests. To be clear, 0.8% of requests doesn't mean 0.8% of the time you submit a prompt, it might go wrong. It means that every single step that the model does, so every tool call, every pause, every time it waits for something, there's a 0.8% chance it got routed incorrectly to a thing that was dumber. That means that if you send 10 messages and they average 10 things per message, it is basically impossible you could do that without hitting this at least once. And when it got bumped to 16%, your average message is going to hit the wrong model. Mm-hmm. So what was the wrong model that was being hit? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. This is damning. It's the 1 million context window. And guess what model just released with a 1 million?
We're not going that far yet.
Okay.
Don't spoil the lead here.
You can figure it out.
So it is confirmed by Anthropic that the mistake that happened here was they were incorrectly detecting when the context was needing more room. For if you're not familiar, context windows are how much text can you give the model and still have it generate results. Historically, we've relied on tools like compaction, where you take the history and then compress it down by asking the model, summarize all of this for us so that you don't go over the limits, which in Anthropic's case are usually around 200,000 tokens. 200,000 tokens is a lot of tokens, but when you're reading a lot of files and bloating the context window with a lot of bullshit in like a 50,000 token system prompt, the likelihood that you're getting close to that is much higher. And I've had single prompts generate like 400,000 tokens, not of output from the model, but tool call responses, prompting, system prompts, stuff like that. The error that Anthropic has officially confirmed was causing a regression for users is that they were erroneously routing people to the 1 million context window version of Sonnet instead of the 200,000 token context window version, thereby confirming a few important things. First off, that there's effectively different versions. We're not saying that they're actually different models, just that the way that they are hosted, deployed, trained, or something is different about those. That isn't a conspiracy. That's just like obviously true, right? Mm-hmm. That the million token version and the 200K token version are in some way different beyond just the window that they have.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not that when you go over 200K tokens, it gets dumber. It's that the version that limits to 200K and the version that doesn't, there is an intelligence difference between them, as confirmed by Anthropic in their own reporting September last year. That is not a conspiracy, right? Awesome. So now we have a couple facts established. We have the compute crisis established. We have the previous regressions, and in particular, that these previous regressions could be measured by whether or not the million token window version was being hit. That is established. We also know for a fact that Anthropic is using multiple different providers, not just of servers, but of the actual inference compute, where a company like OpenAI is almost exclusively using NVIDIA GPUs for their compute. Anthropic isn't. Anthropic is balancing between the NVIDIA GPUs they have all over the place, Amazon's Trainium GPUs or TPUs, whatever the hell they are, that are part of the AWS Bedrock stuff, and Google's TPUs that they're using for all sorts of different things. So there's 3 different types of compute being used. which makes the hosting of the model significantly more complex. I don't envy the engineers who have to handle all of the routing and things like that. So we have a few things established. Million token version is dumber. They have to deal with compute across lots of different places, lots of different platforms, and they are in a compute crisis.
Yeah.
One other thing that has been relatively established externally at this point is that there is a lot of disdain between the researchers and the product side at Anthropic, where the people who are working on tools like Claude Code aren't well respected by the people who are working on training the models themselves.
Yep.
None of this is conspiratorial. None of this is unreasonable. All of this is effectively fact that can be established with public existing information. Now that we have my core points established, we're going to start conspirizing.
All right.
So from this point on, everything I say is a lot less factual, a lot more observatory based on my understanding of the world and the information that we have shared so far. I don't think you can train very well on Trainium. I don't think you can train very well on Google's TPUs either. I think most of the training being done is on NVIDIA's GPUs. There's a lot of characteristics that make NVIDIA's GPUs different from other things. One of those characteristics that I was hoping to get confirmed ahead of time with people who know what they're talking about, but my understanding is that NVIDIA pretty hard limits the amount of VRAM available on their GPUs. And there's lots of reasons why that is the case. But even just setting up all of the NVLink work in order to get a bunch of GPUs to effectively share the work they are doing makes it more expensive. Having a larger context window requires more VRAM because there is more data, more changes to the model that is having to be held in memory. So if you're bumping from 200K tokens of context to a mil, you need more VRAM. That is one of the many reasons why most providers, including OpenAI, choose to charge more money when you break the 200K token window context. They double the price per token in and out because it costs them more money because they have to use GPUs and clusters with more VRAM. I don't think this is necessarily the case for Trainium or for Google's TPUs.
I have nothing intelligent to say on this because I do not know anything to any deep level on any of these chips, so continue.
It is easier to get a MacBook with 128 gigs of RAM that can be used as VRAM because it's universal memory than it is to get a GPU from NVIDIA with more than 20 gigs of VRAM. That is what the fact.
That's really stupid, but actually it is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is just reality.
Yep.
It is not that hard to plug a shitload of RAM into an ARM or TPU of some form. It seems to be either harder or artificially inflated that NVIDIA does not allow such a thing. So if you have a bunch of researchers that exclusively like using NVIDIA, but you also have deals with other companies that are making chips that aren't NVIDIA chips, that the researchers don't like, but technically can run the models.
I see where this is going, and that makes a lot of sense.
So now you have the demand for larger token windows as well. That is increasing demand. This would take the best GPUs away from the researchers if you went to NVIDIA for this. But you also just signed that deal with AWS and that deal with Google, where you have more VRAM available per chip. And you can, hypothetically, do the 1 million token context window without having to use better GPUs on that side. As of a few weeks ago, Anthropic took the 1 million token context version of Claude models out of early access and referred to it now as generally available. And they removed the price difference between the non-1 mil token version and the 1 mil token version.
Ooh, I did not see that.
Yeah, it's no longer priced 2x.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
but there's
200K
still
to a
different
mil.
slugs, and there's still different API endpoints.
Yes. Now are you seeing where this is going?
Yes, I am.
A few more facts we need to establish before I can go further in my conspiracies. As of an update to Claude Code in late March, when they made that change, you know what? I'll have you do this yourself on your machine. Open up Claude Code. I'm sure you have it installed.
I don't have it installed,
don't?
actually.
I will just show you this on my machine. So when I do /model on my machine, I have 3 options: default, sonnet, and haiku. Default is Opus 4.7 with 1 million context. There is no way within Claude Code to not set the 1 million context version.
Oh.
Every single person who is on the latest Claude Code and doesn't take the time to find the hacky hidden flags they can put in the random.claude/settings.json file to force disable the 1 million context version is being routed to the 1 million context version, and you can't change it from within Claude Code. You have to manually configure this. My conspiracy here is that they pushed this change out to force all heavy users of the Max 5X and 20X plan to be routed to Amazon and Google instead of their NVIDIA GPUs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest, it makes a lot of sense. And I assume because this is getting into chip stuff, which again, I take everything I say here with a grain of salt. But from my understanding externally, the only chips that they are currently actually getting more of are the like Google TPUs and then some Amazon stuff. Nvidia stuff is super, super backed up. Like I don't think that any of that is shipping for a while to any of the labs. And the only one that has not even a surplus, but at least a usable supply is OpenAI. So naturally, Anthropic is trying to do all of this. And assuming what you said is correct, which it almost certainly is, that the models were trained on NVIDIA hardware, which means that they were also probably using NVIDIA software and that whole stack. The models are probably optimized for NVIDIA stuff, like just naturally based on the way they were made. I don't know if there's a major difference there where like, is that a thing where if it is trained on NVIDIA, it is naturally going to be better for running on NVIDIA? I know this is a thing with some open source models where they will run much better on like older NVIDIA architectures or newer NVIDIA architectures based on different factors.
I don't think this has anything to do with the training so much as like the configuration, the way that they actually generate the like model files itself, and like the weights are different depending on the different architectures, like FP4 versus FP8, all these different things. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of that matters. I just think the chips are worse and that the performance is worse. I think NVIDIA does the best job of inference right now by far, and that is provable in many different ways in many different places. Like Jensen earned the right to gloat. He seems to have won here in general. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go too deep on the details there because I don't know them and I don't want to be wrong. I'm already deep in conspiracy land. I don't want to perjure myself further. But I genuinely believe that the 1 million token version of these models is dumber, and most people's requests are now being routed almost exclusively to the 1 million token context version. 1 million tokens of context should be more compute. So the only reason they would do a suicide run like that when they are obsessed with reducing compute, the only reason that they would lower prices for the first time in modern Anthropic history, the only reason they would give us something like this that seems in many ways is generous, the only reason this type of change would ship at all is if it isn't actually costing them compute when they're in the middle of a compute crisis. And the only reason they would ever ship something like this is, to put it simply, because the researchers are okay with it. And the only reason the researchers would be okay with it is if this change doesn't affect the GPUs they want, which I'm guessing is the case. So I genuinely believe that your requests going through Claude Code or API or whatever else are now hitting dumber boxes and getting dumber results. That's just one of the layers here, though. The rest, I think, is much more fun.
Okay.
This one is the conspiracy side. I wanted to open with that. The rest is mostly me just speculating at the straight-up incompetence in engineering at Anthropic. One of the numbers in that report from the AMD person was the thinking redaction over time that seemed to map with the intelligence degradation over time. As I was saying before, a model relies on the history in the thread to generate what is most likely to be next. That history could just be the things it and you have said. The history could be all of the tool calls, but that history should include thinking, because the reasoning work the model does has a lot of useful information in it, like what paths it's trying, how it thought about those paths, all these other things. It is token hungry, but it is useful. One of the problems for doing something like switching between models from different providers or different labs, like if I wanted to have a Anthropic thread for the first 3 messages and switch to OpenAI for the 4th, is that all of the reasoning that was done can't be accessed outside of Anthropic's API because they are holding it hostage out of fear of distillation. We no longer get thinking traces from Anthropic. So if you want the model to know what it thought about before in order to generate an accurate next response, you have to rely on their API to correctly flag the thread that you're in and find all of those messages in the specific thinking data that they hopefully preserved for you in order to get the right context to the model to generate the next thing correctly.
And you have to make sure that the ID that is linked to this thread is saved somewhere and is passed in correctly every single time, or else it will just be gone in the void.
And specifically that Anthropic is mapping all of this together correctly such that their API, which used to just take a payload from the user and just blindly throw it at the model, maybe match caching if they have it set up. It is now a much more complex process where it has to map between the thread, the body that you send, the individual messages, and the individual cached and stored thread cache like thinking data that it can then use to reconstruct the proper full chat history before sending it to the model or making the cache write that it then sends the data from to the model. This is a company that built a product just a few days ago, Claude Design, that I let run for 30 plus minutes that used almost 50% of my allocated usage on my $200 a month plan, and then RMRF'd all of the files it made and told me it was done and to look at them. I was looking at a very nice page it designed, and then it told me to give feedback on them, and I went to check them again, and all of them disappeared. I even asked, did the files go away? It's like, oh yeah, all the files are gone. Would you like me to recreate them? How confident do you think I am in this company's ability to map IDs when they can't even leave files in a directory on their servers?
Very, very not confident.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So I'm going to drop conspiracy theory number 2 here. Number 1 was that they are forcing us all on the 1 million context versions in order to save the NVIDIA GPUs for the holier than thou researchers. Conspiracy number 2 is they are so fucking bad at engineering that the change to reasoning being obfuscated has resulted in the reasoning data not being properly available to the models. Therefore, they make much dumber decisions as a result.
Hey, that makes actually perfect sense. Because even just going back to the post that we were talking about earlier on, or the issue we were talking about earlier on, everything that's gone horribly wrong over the last few months, the number of like estimated tokens is so absurd that like, oh, something weird has to be happening on the back end. Like, it's so hard to speculate on this because we can't see any of it. But just from the outside, cache mapping is kind of a hard problem, especially across like they have a load balancer for like network request, and then they have a load balancer for GPUs, and also like they have to be using the cache on the GPUs correctly, which like saves a lot of time and is really good for cost, but like that's not a trivial thing to do, to map the exact GPU and exactly where in memory that session is. And then you stack on top of all of that these really important thinking traces, which is just a text file that is now hidden on their server. Anything goes wrong with that ID in any place in any way, it's over and you're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you cannot even know when it happens.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I bet that they are just very quietly doing this behind the scenes and just not saying anything about it. Because like, and I was just thinking about this from the perspective of like a third-party tool who's using this, because, you know, for something like T3 codes, since you're using the agent SDK under the hood, most likely you're totally fine. Well, fine to the extent that Claude Code is fine, because you are reusing, I assume you're reusing their code for like sessions and stuff, like hooking into their management for a thread. So you like, yeah, exactly. So you make a new thread. That thread is now managed by Anthropic's SDK and on paper should be working correctly. But what happens if you're building some custom thing on top of like the AI SDK or anything like that? Are you going to be correctly keeping all of the IDs perfectly in place across all these different things? Probably not. You can, but it's going to be very, very hard.
And when you combine this with a few other things they have recently changed, the likelihood they fuck this up goes up massively. Thing 1 that they changed recently, you might not even know this. Did you know they're using a new tokenizer for Opus 4.7?
I did see that, yes.
Did you know that it is using 1.47x more tokens per request?
Yep.
They said 1.35, it's actually 1.5. They're just lying about that. That's a fun one, because when you have a different tokenizer for 2 different very similar models and 3 different very similar models, for Opus 4.5 and 4.6, and everything else before them on the Sonnet 4 Plus line has used the same tokenizer. A dot update changing tokenizers is an unprecedented change that has never happened with any of the labs before. OpenAI changed their tokenizer for GPT-3, for GPT-4, and for O1, and then carried it through to GPT-5. There's no reason to change this other than weird bullshit in your hosting, as far as I could ever be concerned. Thing 2 they recently did that you might not know about. Do you know what the TTL is for the caches that you do on Anthropic right now?
No idea.
It used to be an hour long. So if you wrote a cache, it would stay there for an hour. And if you made another request on that thread, the cache data from that would be hit and you wouldn't have to pay anywhere near as much for generating those input tokens. You do have to pay for the cache, right? Which is fucking stupid, especially because they just lowered the cache time down from an hour to 5 fucking minutes.
Yeah. I get why they did that one, because obviously just having basically the very precious memory being just allocated sitting there for an hour sucks. I get it. But also like,
it's not in memory. It can be in fucking storage.
I guess true. Yeah. But it has to be somewhere where it's hot enough that it can be put in relatively quickly, and they still have to pay to store that.
And also it is likely different between the 3 different architectures that they're hosting on. So they also have to make sure if you're hitting the Trainium chips with your thread and the cache is Trainium specific, that your next thing that happens in the next 5 minutes is hitting Trainium again.
And I think like that's honestly probably what's really happening here. My guess would be like everything we described here, the full pipeline went from just like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It is now every single step, there's like a hellish decision tree. Like, this is just an insane tree of if statements that need to be correctly traversed down for all the permutations of models and GPUs now, and the caching system, and just keeping all of this put together in a sane way is not the easiest engineering problem in the world. Not even close. It is a very difficult problem. I wouldn't be surprised if they just fuck something up behind the scenes.
Not to derail, but I do want to complain about the caching costs because we tried our hardest to set caching up properly on Anthropic stuff in order to like make the inference cheaper on T3 chat, not T3 code. Our AI chat app is the thing that we were trying to optimize here. And we did all of the recommended ways to do caching. And I was not super confident in the ways that we had done that. So I went and double checked what percentage of our bill, when we had the default caching set up the way they recommended, what percentage of our bill do you think was cache rights?
I would
The
guess
bill was $30,000 for the month.
probably at least 33%.
Over 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spent
I'm not surprised.
$15,000 just writing to cache.
Yeah. And like for something like T3 chat, I don't even know if it makes all that much sense to do cache write stuff because like it's a normal chat app. It's not a full agent loop where like even if you have a long thread of like 30 messages back and forth between the user, that's still like fewer round trips from API back to the harness than like 1 or 2 file edits within Claude Code would be. Like a Claude Code, a single like prompt will do hundreds of API calls. T3 chat will end up doing like maybe 30 if the user's going completely insane, but the average case is probably like 1 to 3. And at that point, like you're just paying. I don't think the economics make any sense there when the tokens are there are as few tokens going in and out as there are.
It's insane. So yeah, they have made a lot of changes to these surfaces that would introduce potential regressions. I think that is pretty obvious. Changing how the caching works on fundamental level, splitting across 3 different architectures, changing the size of the model and how many tokens it's allowed to take in during its context window, changing the tokenizer randomly for a dot update. All of these things result in a massive amount of surface area to just fuck shit up. And this is a company that is very good at engineering best practices and clearly ships high quality, reliable software at every turn.
Yeah.
I would like to remind you all that this is a company that accidentally made a model that was good at coding and has since had to go from hating engineers to pretending to like them. The reason that Anthropic's founders left OpenAI was frustration between research and engineering, because OpenAI was led by 2 engineers, Anthropic was led by researchers that didn't like working with engineers. And that has boiled through their culture ever since. And the result is a toxic cesspit that is shipping garbage fucking software that we can't trust for anything. So my conspiracies are here because of the combination of zero fucking transparency and zero fucking quality that this company ships.
And I think a lot of it too is it's also the safety stuff. Like a lot of the reason they formed too was the safety concerns.
They say that, but it was actually the layoffs and the frustration with the engineering versus research like disposition.
I wouldn't be surprised. That makes sense. But more what I was going to on that point is just that it seems like Anthropic, at least the way they are presenting themselves publicly and the way they are acting and the way they are doing things, you can get as cynical as you want about whether Mythos is just marketing or whatever. I think it's real. But regardless of what you think about that, clearly they are doing a bunch of stuff to try and preserve security or whatever. And the result of that has also been more degradations, even outside of everything we just talked about, that are verifiable, where they are putting these very, very stupid system prompts into everything because they are horribly afraid of any of these models doing anything related to cybersecurity. And they're getting lobotomized on that axis too.
Yep, they literally trained the model to be worse at security, and now it is just worse at code. The same way that it turns out, if you make a model really good at code and you intentionally avoid all security stuff, it still gets good at security because coding knowledge makes you better at security research type tasks. Trying to make it worse at security probably makes the model worse at code too. One of my favorites is that the new model is clearly poisoned with open source benchmarks, and SWE bench is now almost entirely like just I don't think it's reliable anymore. I think that it has actually just been polluted in the training data at this point.
Probably.
So the models now can recreate commits by the hash depending on the project. So
yeah,
it's over.
Polluted.
That's over. That the entire that model and that training in that specific benchmark has been fully polluted at this point.
Yep. It's tough too because I feel like most benchmarks are pretty polluted at this point. Like I
even fucking Skatebench got hit.
Yeah. Like every single solitary thing that could be construed as a benchmark is getting folded in there by someone at one of these labs. They have so many people looking at all of this, so many people doing stuff here. They're doing everything in their power to look good on these benchmarks to survive right now.
Yep.
And it's getting really hard to test new models, to be honest with you.
Every bench is saturated or tainted at this point.
Yeah, it is. And it kind of sucks because like as more models are released over the course of this year, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between them. Like I think with Opus 4.7, this was a nice moment where like it actually just wasn't that much better. And it was pretty instantly obvious that it wasn't, especially with the weird system prompt lobotomization. It was just actively worse for a lot of users. But if say it had been better, we're getting to a point where it's like, most of these models can do most day-to-day tasks. What are like you need to do a multi-hour run to really start seeing the difference between a lot of these things.
I do believe Anthropic employees, though, when they say that this model is better for them, because that's the thing I'm probably reading into the most and arguably the most unnecessarily. When Boris says this model has been significantly better, especially for long-running engineering tasks, I'm taking him at his word there. I don't think he would lie about that. I don't think the average Anthropic employee is a liar. I think that they are given better things than we get externally, and they just straight up don't use the things we use externally. And the result is this weird dynamic where like trust is built on a combination of reliability and transparency. Ideally, you do both. You provide reliable services, features, products, comms, whatever, and you're transparent both when things are going well and when things are going poorly. Anthropic is scoring straight zeros on both. Their reliability is fucking garbage. What's their current uptime?
I think they've got at least a 9.
Yeah, they got 1, depending on how you're measuring. But almost every day has had some form of outage for like a month straight. It's a red graph with a lot of orange too. Yeah. It's actually horrifying how unreliable things have been. And that's not even including regressions like what I experienced with the Claude desktop app with the new model, where it just couldn't do anything because the system prompt lobotomized it. This is just how many times does the API fail to respond and does the sign-in fail to work? That's even below a 9 of reliability. When you get into all of the other random product failures, engineering failures, and other things you can encounter that they don't measure because they're not competent enough to, it falls apart. And this could all be resolved with a couple of things. If they would be a little more transparent, if they would open source a couple more things, if they would just communicate with us in a way that didn't involve me texting all of my friends at Anthropic whenever something goes wrong and hoping one of them will respond, or at the very least go unban the account that's banned and then not say anything about it because that's Anthropic.
Yeah.
It's obnoxious. And the hardest part here is they internally genuinely believe we are just talking shit for fun or for some other benefit. I've now had multiple Anthropic employees accuse me publicly of doing this because I have ulterior motives or incentives. And I kind of empathize with them there because the versions of the things they are using internally are so different, including the desktop app. I now have relatively solid confirmation that the version of the desktop app that they use internally has almost no overlap with the one we're using.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they see me shitting on the desktop app and they're an Anthropic employee and they're on the special version of the software, on a special hosted version of the model that is still on NVIDIA GPUs, that is still behaving the way we expect it to, they are having an entirely different experience than we are as end users. So when we say it's shit and they go try it themselves on their special flagged Anthropic account, on their special flagged version of Claude Code, and they don't see the same thing, they just assume that we are the ones who are lying. And neither party is lying here, except for one, their fucking employer. Anthropic is the problem, not the employees, not the engineering, even though the engineering is fucking trash. It is a cultural, systemic, leadership level problem. And if I was on the board at Anthropic, I would be at the point where I'm asking Dario to fucking step down and be replaced with a leader that actually gives a single fuck about engineering. Dario spends more time talking about how he's going to replace all of engineers than he spends making sure their engineers fucking do their jobs.
Because they are a research company and a safety company that is begrudgingly doing engineering things. And it's incredibly obvious that this is the case because they're not using any of their stuff. You can tell that like OpenAI is very clearly an engineering first type org where they are heavily dogfooding everything and they instantly notice when something goes wrong. They actually get it. Anthropic is a research and safety company, and the safety part, at least in their mind, is a very important part because it leads to this. This is the thing that I personally really hate about them, is this obnoxious holier than thou thing that they have, where they genuinely believe that they are saving the world, and it is this noble mission to eradicate all work except for the work done by the benevolent Claude. And they are the only ones who can be trusted with these things. You mere mortals cannot be trusted with the unlobotomized versions of these. We must have our own special tools because you mortals may not have them. That is what is actually happening here. They split it off like that. Like the system prompt lobotomization is the easiest example of that. I guarantee you internally, they do not have a bunch of lines in there that is like, no. If you try and do anything that involves security in the vague sense, tell the user they're being naughty and put them in timeout. But internally, they almost certainly don't have that. They're not lobotomizing it that way.
Absolutely. And if they don't want to do the engineering, they should let us fucking do it for them. Like, just open source a couple things, stop coming at my users, buy more compute because you fucking need it, be more restrictive on what people get. Because like so much of this comes down to the fact that the only reason that they give so much generous usage in the max 20x plan is they're using it as a fucking marketing angle. They expect 80+% of users to use less than $50 of inference on the $200 plan. If that goes from 80% of users using barely any of it to 70%, or they just have a surge where like a bunch of new users sign up for the expensive plan and all of them actually use it for the inference that they're provided, that just fucks up all of their economics, not around the dollars they're spending, but about around the compute that they have to allocate.
Yeah. And that's what happened with OpenClaw. Like that is almost certainly what happened, where like a bunch of new users came in, they bought the big plans, and these are normally more normie users who would not have normally spent that much on inference, who now suddenly did just by like the heartbeat thing.
Yeah. And they painted themselves into this corner. And instead of embracing it or apologizing for it or doing anything resembling transparency, they just continue to be fucking opaque and obnoxious. I cannot wait for other companies to have good enough models. Like the moment Google puts something out that actually listens to its instructions, there will be no reason to use anything Anthropic releases.
Same. I'm like genuinely at this point, I'm just fucking done talking about this company and dealing with all of this. Like it is just exhausting. I cannot wait for the other labs to start doing stuff. And like, honestly, like I listen, I love making fun of Google and bullying them, but that's just like, that's a love of the game thing. Like making fun of Google is just an enjoyable pastime, but I don't actually care. Like I hope Gemini gets good. Genuinely, I would love to see a 3.5 Pro model or whatever that actually was really good at tool calling and instruction following and took their insane level of knowledge. Because like I've been using 3 Flash a lot more lately, because one of the 6 things you can do is you can just give it the URL to a YouTube video, and the entire video gets loaded into context implicitly. And it's really, really good at parsing that. You can parse out any detail and a bunch of very useful timestamps just by giving it a URL and a prompt. It's good stuff. There is a kernel of useful things in Google land. They just need to fix the whatever part of the pipeline, I think it's RL, that is like getting it good at tool calling and actually working in our agent harnesses. You fix that, we have something good. Yeah, obviously like OpenAI is great. We'll see what they end up doing in the future. Fucking done with Anthropic.
I have a site I want to make in the near future, and I'll say it here in case anybody in the community decides to do this for me. I want to track some very obtuse metrics from all of the labs. I want to track at Anthropic how many products they release from when we started complaining about the lack of transparency to whenever they finally put out an actual update about what we're allowed to use the Claude Code sub for. I can currently count 4 product releases they have done since they promised us the update to now where we still don't have the update. So I want to keep track of that. I want to track at Google how many important people leave between model releases. We are currently at 4 people who are important that have left since Gemini 3.1 Pro. I want to track at OpenAI how many times Tebow resets our rate limits between releases. That'll hopefully be the highest number. Anthropic might be able to beat it just because of how fucking slow they are.
Well, considering they'll probably never do it, they'll win. Like eventually an infinite number will naturally grow out of it. Like they're not, I hope I'm wrong on this, but like I expect them to just keep kicking this down the road until like they either do something super drastic and just execute it, or just quietly keep banning stuff in the background. Yeah. I don't think you're getting an answer.
And at XAI, I want to track how many random accounts Nikita bans between Grok releases.
I didn't know about the Google like 4 people leaving, but isn't like all of XAI gone at this point?
Oh yeah, that's why we can't track that anymore, because I don't think my number tracker can go that high.
Well, because I thought when you said people leaving, I thought you were going to say XAI, but I was
Not
like, wait,
Google.
they're all gone. Damn.
There's nothing to track there.
Yeah.
100% is a complete number.
Rest in peace, Grok Code Fast. That was a beautiful model.
You're
I
the
miss that
only
thing.
person in the world who thought that.
I had a wonderful time with it. That was a fun 2
You know what? You
weeks.
should go back to it.
No, I'm good. I listen, it is one of those things where like I want to keep my nostalgia goggles on for it. I don't actually want to see how horrible it is. I want to remember in my heart the good days of Grok Code Fast. Those were good days.
Well, you hold Grok in your heart. I'm going to continue being a rational person that spends their Saturday afternoon conspirizing about Anthropic.
Yes, much more sane. Thank you.
And I thank you all for taking the time to listen to us do all of this. If you enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching there, the follow button on other platforms. And if you can, give us a rating. Apparently that matters according to my ops person who is telling me we need to tell you to do this. I'm telling you now, please do it. And Delissa, please stop telling me to say this. I am tired and annoyed. I think I did everything I have to. Can I go pack for my trip?
Yeah, we really need to. Like,
yeah, I have to leave in 30 minutes for a flight and I haven't even started packing yet. So I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
Bye, nerds.